in Rule 4.3. Remind the teams that there is no recesses allowed, with the exception of that for a health emergency, and especially no recesses between the end of the witness examination and the beginning of closing argument. I would ask the scoring panelist if he or she has any reason to be biased in judging any team. And if that panelist is concerned that he or she may notify me through the courtroom monitor. And we'll ask the competition committee to name a replacement. And I'd ask if any of the team members have any objections to any of the scoring panelists. I'd like to remind the team and their coaches that any disputes that arise out of this competition must be reported in accordance with the competition guidelines. I'd like to remind the teams that their compliance with the time requirements will be considered in scoring each of their individual performance. I'd like to confirm that no coach or team member, other than the timekeeper, is seated in the jury box. I'd like to now at this time swear in the members, the gallery, and the scoring panelists in accordance with the ethical code of this competition. I'd like the members to stand and address as follows. Team members, please raise your right hand. Do you promise that the presentation you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? They're all nodding affirmatively. To the witnesses, do you promise that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witness statements, that you will not add material facts or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial competition? Nodding affirmative, all members. Gallery members, that they are present, including teachers and attorney coaches, family members and friends. I'd like you also to raise your right hand. And do you promise to represent yourselves as positive role models and to behave in a manner that exemplifies the ethical and professional sportsmanship during this mock trial? And finally, panelists, please raise your right hand. Do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of this mock trial competition? Oh, thank you. We should give this oath in real life and see what happens. Okay, that's we've all introduced ourselves, and I've asked then, I guess, are the competition teams ready to proceed to trial? I see nodding heads. Well then, is there any procedural matters that either side would like to bring forth before we do opening statements?
Yes, Your Honor, the plaintiff side has a few.
Yes, please address them one at a time.
Firstly, we will be screen sharing exhibits as the trial moves on, and we ask that once an exhibit is screen shared, it be considered constructively published to the jury. We would also like to confirm that both yourself, all of the members of the jury, and all the members of opposing counsel have copies of the exhibits and affidavits in front of them so that they may refer to them if our screen sharing fails or for any other reason that might be necessary. And finally, we ask that any time remaining in closing be reserved for rebuttal.
Any objection from the other side? Fence?
No, Your Honor.
I'd only ask that the screen sharing only occurs after the exhibit has been moved forward and admitted by the court. You understand that, both sides?
Absolutely.
Okay. Is that anything else from either side?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense has some preliminary matters.
Please go ahead.
I ask for the purpose of clarity, because there are two members of the Weirs family testifying today, that as necessary, we are permitted to refer to them by their first names. I also...
Okay, let's take them one at a time. Any objection to that?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, then that will be acceptable. That's not normally my rule in the courtroom, but understanding that there are two family members, I will accept it for the purpose of this one trial. Go ahead.
And lastly, Your Honor, I ask permission for the removal of our masks while testifying on the witness stand and the attorneys questioning the witness.
I would only ask that the people in the room with you agree to that. The rest of us probably have no concerns, but it would only be an issue for those in your immediate vicinity. If they can look behind you and if they agree, then there's no objection. And that goes for all parties. I only ask that those in your room, whoever you may be, have an agreement with regards to mask on, mask off, or political views to that effect, okay? So that's granted also then. Anything else?
No, Your Honor. With that, the defense is ready to proceed.
Okay, well then I'd ask the plaintiff step forward and let's proceed with opening statements.
Your Honor, if you would allow me one moment while we get our timekeeper in the room.
That's no
My
problem.
apologies.
You just let me know when you're ready to go.
Thank you, Your Honor. My apologies, Your Honor. We are ready to start if I may proceed.
Please go ahead.
Profits over people. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. We are here today because of the negligence of Lush Fertilizer and the damages that it had on my client, Dakota Weirs. Today, we have the burden of proof to prove three things. One, that Lush Fertilizer, it was negligent with their product. Two, that their product had damages. And three, that these damages had real cause on my client, Dakota Weirs, in the form of non-Hodgkin lymphoma, a form of cancer. You see, my client, Dakota Weirs, was an aspiring pianist. I mean, she was inspired by her grandpa ever since she could remember and began lessons at the age of 7. This passion drove her to win recitals and awards throughout high school and even get a full ride scholarship to the most prestigious art school in the country, Juilliard. But unfortunately, she was unable to attend because of the sickness that Lush Fertilizer gave to her. You see, not only was she an aspiring pianist, but she also was a stellar student. In school, she got straight A's, participated in National Honor Society, and also student government. And outside of school, she volunteered for homeless shelters and was also able to keep up a job since the age of 14, just to put herself through school. But she was unable to attend because now it even hurts to sit on the piano bench for a period of time. It hurts to breathe. She has swollen lymph nodes. Her fingers can't play the same way she used to, and who knows if she'll ever be able to get back to her old self. You'll also hear from Carson Durst. You see, Carson Durst was a researcher for Lush Fertilizer for some time. It was her job to look at the fertilizer and come back and report her findings to Lush. Carson Durst found that Drufo was a chemical in Lush Fertilizer and that it was potentially dangerous. When she brought this to Lush Fertilizer, they performed a test. And when those tests came back that there was a possibility that Drufo was a carcinogen, Lush just swept it under the rug. They said that this stays in these walls because they did not want to lose any money. They valued profit over people. Finally, you'll hear from Dr. Casey Rogers. See, Dr. Casey Rogers performed a series of tests to connect non-Hodgkin lymphoma and Drufo. And what did he find? That there's a definite connection between these two things, proving that Lush Fertilizer is poisonous and caused my client's cancer. Today, you'll hear from defense. They'll try and tell you that the CEO, Blake Doncourt, had no idea. But you'll see that there was an email sent out and tests performed that Blake Doncourt knew about and did nothing about it. You see, she could have done two things. One, she could have baked the product, costing only a mere 10% of her profits. Or she could have put a sufficient warning label on her fertilizer, and she did not do any of those two things. Why? Because she valued her profit over the livelihood of the people. You'll also hear from Skyler Weirs. This is the twin sister of Dakota Weirs, testifying on the opposite side today. And you'll hear that Skyler had everything to gain from Lush winning this case and everything to lose from Lush losing. Your Honor, today, and jury members, we ask that you find in favor of my client, Dakota Weirs, and stop this pattern of profits over people, and let no one else feel the pain that Dakota Weirs does. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Defendant, are you ready to proceed with your opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes, you may.
A famous author once said, "People who jump to conclusions rarely alight on them." In other words, you must use your evidence, reason, and common sense to lead you to an accurate conclusion. Your Honor, members of the jury, my name is Daniela Guadana, and along with my co-counsel, Alyssa Avila and Angela Urbano, we represent our client, the defendant, Lush Fertilizer. Lush is one of the world's largest companies who produces commercial and yard fertilizer while working to build a better tomorrow. After many years of hard work and commitment to the community, Lush has become a successful, valued company through its green methodology. Now, they're being falsely accused of causing Dakota's cancer. Please remember, the plaintiff holds the burden of proof in this case. Dakota Weirs must prove that it is more likely than not that out of all of the other chemicals she worked with and out of all of the other environmental conditions she was exposed to as work as a landscaper, it was Lush and none of the many other products she used that caused her cancer. As the defendants, we have no burden to prove anything in this case. Instead, we will show that it cannot be concluded that Lush caused Dakota's cancer. Only leaping to conclusions could give you this result. You will hear from the plaintiff's witnesses, and you will quickly realize that they've leaped to conclusions. Carson Durst will tell you about their limited industry experience at the time of Drufo's research and acknowledge never looking into Lush's data underlying Drufo's safety. Instead, Carson jumped to the conclusion that Drufo must have been unsafe, even without having evidence to support this conclusion. You will also hear from Dr. Casey Rogers, who will talk about a study that shows an alleged link between DRUFO and cancer. But this study was flawed. It failed to account for other environmental factors and did not consider the possible carcinogenicity of other fertilizers. Additionally, the study was never peer-reviewed or replicated. May I remind you that these are two critical pieces of the scientific method that help prevent scientists from jumping to unsound conclusions. You'll also hear from Dakota Weirs herself, who is a young person who has to deal with the unfair situation of fighting cancer at such a young age. But this does not take away from the fact that Dakota jumped to the conclusion that there was a connection between DRUFO and her cancer after watching a news story talking about a possible link. You will also hear from the defense witnesses today. You'll hear from Blake Doncourt himself, CEO of Lush Fertilizer. His passion as an environmentalist will shine through. He will tell you that he would never hurt anyone and would in fact make sure his product is safe. He is leader of a company who is responsible for producing vibrant, lush green grass in a safe manner, of course. Then you will hear from Dr. Devin Williams, the brains behind Lush Fertilizer. She will give her all of the scientific explanations backing up the safety of Blake's promises. You will see she is a very educated woman with years of experience in toxicology. She will tell you that in her work, she follows the evidence where it leads and does not jump to conclusions. Finally, you'll hear from Skyler Weirs, Dakota Weirs' twin sister. She will tell you all about her research, on which she spent almost a year. And during her research, she meticulously reviewed all of the evidence. And instead of jumping to the conclusion that must have been more convenient for her family, she actually found that DRUFO is not cancerous and that it actually helps protect from other pesticides. The plaintiff will try to tell you that Lush Fertilizer was at fault for causing Dakota's cancer, but do not jump to this conclusion based on your reasonable sympathy for a person who is suffering. Instead, take a step back and really look at the evidence that both sides will present to you. You'll quickly notice the plaintiff's whole case is built on possibility, not probability, correlation, not causation. There is no way that you will be able to conclude that it is more likely than not that Lush Fertilizer caused Dakota Weirs' cancer. Your Honor, members of the jury, I ask that you don't rush to judgment. Do not jump to a faulty conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are the plaintiffs ready to call their first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Dakota Weirs to the stand.
Ms. Ware, do you understand you're under oath to swear to tell the truth today in this courtroom?
I do.
Okay, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, can you please state and spell your name for the court?
My name is Dakota Weirs. Last name is spelled W-E-I-R-S.
Ms. Weirs, why are you here today?
I'm here today because I used Lush Fertilizer and now I'm sick.
Ms. Weirs, did you attend high school?
Yes, I was able to graduate from high school.
And how were you as a student?
In high school, I was an amazing student. I got really good grades. I was president of my student government. I was involved in my National Honor Society, and I volunteered outside of school, and I even was able to hold a job while also pursuing my dream career of being a concert pianist.
How did you get into piano?
Well, I was into piano as little as I could remember. Like when I was 2, I would play with the pedals. That's the only part I could reach on a little mini grand piano my grandfather bought me. He was actually my greatest inspiration for starting piano. But sadly, he passed away. And I just remember watching him play and thinking he was so big and strong. And it really inspired me.
Ms. Weirs, when did you take up beginning to play piano?
Well, once my parents saw that I was actually good at it and So shortly after my grandfather passed, they started lessons for me. So that was around the time I was 7.
And how did this take you through high school?
Well, through high school, with playing piano, I participated in many recitals, competitions. I was even able to win some competitions, and I even got offered a bunch of scholarships, including a full ride scholarship to Juilliard. I mean, can you believe that? But I had to defer my time there.
How come?
Well, I can't even play piano anymore. It simply just hurts to sit on the bench. My swollen lymph nodes are really painful. I get tired, I lose my breath, and it's hard to play.
And why is that?
Because it simply just hurts. I mean, even though if you think piano, it's not that taxing, but with my condition, it's tiring, it's painful.
Ms. Weirs, what is your condition?
I have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a form of cancer.
Now, Ms. Weirs, you said you were able to keep a job. What is that job?
Yeah, I worked at Haven Landscaping, which is a landscaping company.
And what were your responsibilities?
I was primarily responsible for spreading seed and fertilizer.
What sort of fertilizers did you work with?
Well, I remember working with a couple of fertilizers, but one I remember using was Lush fertilizer, which we used for about 3 or 4 years.
Now, Ms. Weirs, what were the working conditions like at Lush?
I remember it being really hot all the time.
And Ms. Weirs, why are you suing Lush Fertilizer today?
Well, I was it's kind of a story. I was in a pretty serious state of depression one day, and I was watching the news, and something came up about how Drufo, which is a product that Lush uses, is linked to non-Hodgkin's, which is what I have. So I took that as, like I have non-Hodgkin's, and I used the product for many years. So I contacted my boss, and I looked at the label, and it would surprise me really.
Now, Ms. Weirs, are you familiar with this label?
Yes, I am. I worked with the product.
How long did you work with the product?
For about 4 years before we stopped using it at Haven Landscaping.
If you ever see a copy of this label today, would you be able to recognize it?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, at this time, I'm showing Ms. Weirs what is marked as Exhibit 1. Well, for your knee, I will attempt to. Ms. Weirs, do you have a copy? Oh, never mind. Here it is. Ms. Weirs, what do you see in front of you?
This is the label for Lush fertilizer.
How do you know?
Because I worked with the product, and and it says Lush fertilizer at the top.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to admit Exhibit 1 into evidence as it is a fair and unmarked copy.
Any objections?
No, Your Honor.
With no objections, the court will admit Exhibit 1 on behalf of the plaintiff.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, can you please read under ingredients?
Yeah, under active ingredients, it's Drufo, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, iron, and that's it's 48.6%, and then other ingredients are 51.4%.
Ms. Weirs, what stands out to you under these ingredients?
That they use a product called Drufo.
Any other chemicals?
And also nitrogen. I know that's not really good.
Ms. Weirs, in your experience, have you worked with other fertilizers?
Yes, I have.
Did you work primarily with Lush, or did you also equally work with other fertilizers?
Well, I worked with Lush in the beginning 4 years, and then after we stopped using the product and used other products. But I remember that they all had, what I remember was different from the labels was that they had some sort of warning or something. I didn't see any warning on this label.
Ms. Weirs, to your knowledge, did the other fertilizers contain Drufo?
No, they did not contain Drufo.
And did the other products contain nitrogen?
Yes, they did.
Sorry, what was that, Ms. Weirs?
Yes.
Moving on, can you please read under user safety recommendations?
Under the recommendations, it says, with any spray fertilizer, utilize protective clothing that covers exposed skin, and use of a respirator or an N95 mask is recommended.
And what stands out to you in this?
That they only recommend these things, which is weird.
Would you consider this an adequate warning?
No, definitely not, especially since they have what seems like a different product or ingredient in it.
And Ms. Weirs, did you adhere to these recommendations?
I mean, like you said, they're only recommendations, so no.
Why is that?
Because if it were a warning or anything else, like a requirement that they were required to use, then I would have worn those protective clothing or followed those. But since these are only recommendations, I mean, I take it as it is.
And knowing what you do now, given your current condition, in hindsight, would you have worn the protective clothing?
Yes, I would have. It put my future at risk. It ruined my life.
And Ms. Weirs, if you had manufactured this label, would you have put a warning?
Of course. I mean, it's such a little thing to do for the livelihood of somebody.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
May I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Good evening, Ms. Weirs. First, I would like to talk to you about your old job. You were employed at Haven Landscaping, correct?
Yes, that is correct, but I can't work there anymore.
And you started working here as a 14-year-old, right?
Yes, when I was 14.
And you really enjoyed working here because you liked working outdoors, correct?
Yes, it was nice. It's something I can't do anymore. I can't even spend my time outside.
But when you did work there, you really loved feeling the wind on your bare face, didn't you?
That is correct, but I barely get that feeling anymore.
And you loved the wind against your bare face so much that you never covered your face, did you?
No, unless the label required me to.
But when using Lush, you never covered your face, even though your boss always told you to do so, correct?
No, because the label was recommended, so I didn't think it was dangerous enough.
But your boss did tell you to cover your face, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And this is because you were working with chemicals, weren't you?
Yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, I would ask that my timekeeper publish Exhibit 1, which has already been admitted.
The permission granted.
Thank you. This picture was sent by your boss, correct?
Yes, that is correct. It's the label I told him to send to me after I saw that news.
And the label looks just as you remember it, right?
Yes, it is.
Ms. Weirs, under user safety recommendations, it says use of respirator or N95 mask is recommended, correct?
Yes, it says that it's recommended, not
And isn't
required.
this, sorry, and isn't this the recommendation on the label that you so clearly remember?
Yes, I remember that it was only a recommendation and that there were no hazards at all, which was what I thought was weird, that they didn't warn to anything or they didn't require us to wear anything.
Ms. Weirs, but you didn't follow the recommendation, right?
I didn't follow them because the label was insufficient. If
But it was
required, I would have followed them. I would never ever want to feel this way that I do feel now.
But you do acknowledge that this recommendation was on the label and was accessible to you.
Yes, I do acknowledge that it was a recommendation.
Thank you. The label also says, as with any spray fertilizer, utilize protective clothing that covers exposed skin, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And you were told to wear long sleeves, pants, and gloves as a precaution of dealing with chemicals when using fertilizer, right?
Yes.
However, you did not use these items, did you?
No, because for this label specifically, it's under the recommendations. Like I said before, I would follow my boss's orders if I were using a different product that required it, which was most other products that I use, they had hazards.
Ms. Weirs, but you were told to wear protective items, right?
Yes, I was, but I didn't for this one because, like I said, it was a recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Weirs, you also used other fertilizers and chemicals, correct?
Yes, ones with sufficient labels and warnings.
And these sufficient labels and warnings said that product should be used outdoors, right?
Yes, if it required us to.
But you often use these products indoors, correct?
I believe I said I remember using the Lushes indoors.
You also used other products indoors when you were supposed to use them only outdoors, correct?
I remember when I said that if there were warnings that warned me about only using them outdoors, I would follow it. And for this product, Lush, I remember using it indoors because they didn't warn me to use it only outdoors or anything like that.
Ms. Weirs, you really love music, right?
I do. It's one of my greatest passions and it's been taken away from me. I can't play anymore and it's more than just a physical toll, it's really emotional too.
And this love of music got you a full ride scholarship from Juilliard, correct?
Yes, one that I had to defer for 2 years, unfortunately.
And this is because your doctor has not given up hope yet, correct?
Yes, he has not given up hope, as I hope that he wouldn't give up hope.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, a brief one.
Proceed.
Ms. Weirs, do other labels contain warnings?
Yes, that is one of the things that really surprised me when I saw Lush Fertilizer's label, is that they did not contain any specific warnings.
And Ms. Weirs, did you adhere to those warnings when they did?
Of course I do. Like I care about my health. If a product said that it would be dangerous, if I had to wear protective clothing, or if I had to only use it outdoors, I followed them.
And
But
would you sacrifice the breeze to be safe?
I would not. I mean, I sacrificed the breeze because of my sickness. I can't feel that anymore now because of Lush Fertilizer's insufficient warning.
And finally, since your doctors have not given up hope, if you do survive this sickness, will you ever be the same again?
I don't think I will. It kind of ruined my life. I mean, having a sickness like this, it's something I will never forget.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. No further questions.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
This witness may be excused, and plaintiffs, you can call your second witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Permission to call Carson Durst to the stand?
Yes, please do. Good afternoon, Ms. Durst. You understand you're under oath giving your testimony here today?
I do.
Okay, you may proceed.
Ms. Durst, could you please state your full name and spell your last name for the jury?
Yes, Carson Durst, D-U-R-S-T.
And Ms. Durst, can you tell me a little bit about your educational background?
Yes, so I went to Arizona State University and there I got my bachelor's in chemicals engineering.
And do you have any professional experience?
Yes, straight out of college, I've been working in the fertilizer industry. So I've been working in the fertilizer industry for almost 2 decades now.
What was your first job?
My first job was actually at Lush,
When did you start working there?
straight out of college in 2003.
Oh, wow. How did you manage to swing a position like that straight out of college?
Yeah, so I was friends with Charles Doncourt. One of his parents is the CEO to Lush Fertilizer, so I became acquainted with Blake. They were like a second family to me, really. So Blake knew who I was. He knew my work ethic. He knew how good of a person I was, and he was willing and able to get me a job at Lush Fertilizer.
Do you still work there?
I do not work there anymore.
Where do you work now?
I now work at Terrace Greenery.
Did you transition straight from Lush over to Terrace?
There was a slight legal battle, and so I had to wait 6 months to work at Terrace Greenery.
Why was there a legal battle?
Well, while I was working at Lush, I have completely forgotten that I had signed a non-compete and non-disclosure agreement, so.
And the legal battle was over that, right?
Yes.
And were you having any other problems with the company at the time?
Yeah, so I was actually fired from Lush Fertilizer, but even before that, I was already looking for a new job because of some tensions, you could say, between my coworkers and I.
What do you mean by tensions?
Well, at first it started as whispers around the water cooler, how I skated by through my job. And then it became more serious, and I don't know how else to explain it. But after I found some pretty damaging evidence, it just suddenly changed.
Before we talk about that evidence, what was your position at Lush Fertilizer?
At the time, I was working for a research and developing team for the Druffel product.
Did you discover this evidence that you're talking about in your role as a researcher?
Yes, I did. As a researcher, it was my job to research the chemical components for a Lush fertilizer Druffel. And I found research that was pretty bad for the company.
What was it?
Well, it was a research done in London, I believe. And it suggested that Druffel may be carcinogenic in rats.
What did you do with that information?
I did what I was supposed to. I put it in my journal because it concerned me. And once I put it in my journal, if it was serious, it could be fixed and changed so no one could get hurt.
What's the procedure at Lush Fertilizer for what's supposed to be done with that journal?
Yes, so for me specifically at my time, Jerry Langley, who was my product manager, they were supposed to read over the journal, summarize it, and send it up to senior management.
Do you believe this particular piece of information that you discovered was relayed to senior management?
Yeah, I actually know that they knew because soon after they sent out an email regarding the parameters of a new study to see if Drufo was carcinogenic in humans.
Were you privy to the results of that study?
Yes, there was actually a meeting and researchers were there, scientists were there, the product manager was there, and even upper management was there.
And what were these results?
Yeah, so one of the scientists did say that they were still very concerned that—
Your Honor, hearsay.
Your objection is hearsay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, do you have a response, please?
Yes, Your Honor. This is a statement made by a party opponent. The scientist that my witness is talking about was an employee of Lush at the time that they made the statement, and Lush Fertilizer is here in court to represent themselves today.
Are you claim a response from the defense?
Your Honor, this witness is relaying a statement that was made out of court to prove the truth of the matter asserted.
It does appear to be a hearsay statement. What exception to the hearsay rule are you invoking?
Are you talking to me, Your Honor?
Yes, I'm sorry, yes.
If I could take a moment to confer with co-counsel just so I can make sure that I'm citing the correct exception, would that be
Yeah,
possible?
certainly. Take a
Thank you,
moment.
Your Honor. One moment.
What I'm looking for is which section of the exception to the hearsay rule you're trying to get this statement in on, and I'll consider that. Please.
Absolutely. I can find that for you in just a moment. I just ask that time be paused very briefly while I do so, since I don't have the exhibits in front of me, given that
I'm going to let you consult, but I'm not pausing the time.
Hi, Your Honor. I was able to find that rule under Rule 801D2, a statement made by a party opponent or a representative or individual of the party opponent, which this scientist would qualify for.
I'm going to allow it.
A statement made by a an exception to the rule. I'm sorry, what did you say, Your Honor?
I apologize. I should have given you time. Restate your response.
It's all right. Under Rule 801D2, a statement made by a party opponent or an individual or representative of the party opponent is an exception to.
I'm going to allow the statement to proceed with your examination, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Durst, if you would allow me to repeat the question.
Yes,
So,
please. Go ahead. You can restate the question and start from there.
in this,
I'm sorry. What's the holdup?
I'm quite sure. I'm worried there may be an audio.
Is
Your Honor, at this time, I request time be paused. It seems that my co-counsel is having an audio issue.
Yes.
So,
we'll pause the time. Is he in a different location than you are?
Yes.
Okay. Timekeepers, I'd like to pause. Are you back, Mr. Jones? Or Mr.
sorry, could you please repeat that?
Can you hear me? You guys hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't. Oh, there you are. Are you back? Speak to me and I make sure we got you.
Maddox, if you need to turn your camera off and just do audio, just do that for the time being.
Were you able to hear that,
Yes.
Maddox? Okay, go ahead. I would like the time still to be paused. Maddox, can you hear
Maddox,
us?
are you back?
Maddox, it looks like you're muted. Amy, do you think, is he still muted?
I am not sure what he's got going on. He
My
is
my
muted.
screen, my screen, it
He
looks
is
like,
muted, but. Oh, I'm still here. I can hear all of you.
Can you
Sounds like you can't hear me though.
guys
Maddox has posted in the chat asking to
Yeah.
leave and then re-enter.
Yes, please do that, Maddox.
can you hear us, Maddox?
can you all hear me?
Yes, we heard you clear. Speak again so we make sure we got you.
Wonderful. Alrighty. Can you still hear me?
Yes,
We can hear you, but you're frozen, so you might want to turn it. Well, now you're back.
Alrighty. I will turn my video off just to avoid that potentially happening again as I'm close to the end of my question.
okay.
Perfect.
Okay, we've got the time paused, so if you can go just orally now without your video, we'll pick up where you left off. Take your
Alrighty,
time and
sounds
get orientated and proceed.
Permission to proceed, Your Honor?
Yes,
Ms. Durst, you said that there was a meeting at the company to review the results of a study conducted about whether or not their product was carcinogenic. Do you remember the results of this study?
Yes, during the meeting, one of the scientists expressed their concerns that Jufo may not only be carcinogenic, but linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
What was the seem to remember from your previous was in the room? What was their reaction to that news?
Yes, all they said was to keep it in the walls.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
cross-exam?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes, yes.
Miss Durst, you are best friends with Charles Doncourt, is that correct?
Yep,
And this is Blake Doncourt's son, correct?
yeah, I already stated that.
You and Charles attended the same college, is that right?
Yes, we did.
And you graduated from this college, correct?
I did, yes.
But Ms. Durst, you weren't on the top of your class, were you?
I did well enough. I mean, it doesn't really matter now.
Is that a yes?
Sure, yeah.
And after graduating, you were having difficulties finding a place of work, is that right?
It's hard for, I believe, any college person straight out of college to get a job anywhere. It's a little bit of a curve, but you gotta do what you gotta do, right?
You were talking to this with Charles, weren't you?
Yeah, I was.
And that's how you found out about Lush Fertilizer hiring, is that right?
Yes, Charles suggested it to me, actually.
Ms. Durst, positions of chemical engineering are hard to come by, aren't they?
I suppose so, yes.
Especially for new graduates without any experience. Is that right?
Yeah,
Seeing this, your best friend was sure that his father could pull some strings for you to get a job at Lush. Is that right?
Blake knew me, he knew my work ethic, he knew I was good for the job, and that's why he was able to give me one.
Ms. Durst, is that a yes?
I suppose so.
And so that's how you started working at Lush. Is that correct?
Yes, because I knew Blake and Blake knew me.
And after working at Lush for a while, you started to pass some more experienced workers, right?
Yes, due to my hard work.
And this is how you were promoted to a product development engineer. Is that right?
Yeah, I was a very hard worker and it really paid off.
So as a postgraduate with no experience in this line of work, you were not qualified for your position, were you?
I wouldn't exactly say qualified. I earned what I did in that job.
Let's talk about that. You were assigned to work on the development of a fertilizer that contains Drufo. Is that right?
Yes,
Specifically, you were assigned to research the safety of the chemical compound Drufo, correct?
yeah, and that's when I found the pretty damaging research evidence.
So in your research, you only found one study that suggested Drufo may be carcinogenic in rats, correct?
It was enough to raise my concern. If it was carcinogenic in rats, who knows what it could do to humans? And it was the responsibility of Lush to try to change it.
Ms. Durst, is that a yes?
Sure.
And you found no studies showing Drufo causes cancer in humans, did you?
No, there was no research for that at that time, but the rat thing was still pretty concerning.
But Lush wanted to make sure Drufo was safe. So you were next assigned to work on a more in-depth research to see whether Drufo could actually cause cancer in humans. Is that right?
Well, there was a study done.
But you were assigned to conduct a more in-depth research about this?
Yes.
So after you and your fellow colleagues finished your research, you said that it was incredibly misleading. Is that right?
It was very misleading in the companies, not just Lush, but data is always meant to be read a certain way to give the company a little more wiggle room in case of a lawsuit like this one.
Yes, and this is due to some of the data being left out of the report. Is that right?
Yes, it was pretty obvious to me that some data was left out of the report because of pressure from upper management.
And you also stated that Lush did its best to hide the fact Drufo could cause cancer in its non-baked form. Is that right?
Yeah, as I said before, there was a lot of pressure from upper management and senior management for the results to be read a certain way so that they could get their product out. Lush was depending on Drufo.
Ms. Durst, I hate to interrupt you, but I don't like to do this, but I'd like you to respond to the questions that are being asked to you and not volunteer information. If we need it, if the defense needs any other information, they'll ask you another question. If you can keep yes and no, if you can. If you need to explain briefly, that's okay, but don't go off on a tangent.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Durst, according to you, the research suggested that the component might be connected to cancer, even though it met government safety protocols. Is that correct?
Yes.
So, but you didn't have any access to all of the complete research, so your opinion is more or less a guess. Is that correct?
I suppose so.
And despite your concern, though, you didn't bother to bring this up to anyone in higher management. Is that right?
I thought it would be passed up to higher management.
And around this time, it was you started having job performance issues. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe because of the research that I found.
In fact, you started being accused of cutting back on your research and just skating along. Is that right?
That's what people believe, but it wasn't true.
Even the executive team at Lush Fertilizer confronted you about this, correct?
Yes, they did. Yeah.
And they made you sign a performance improvement plan. Is that right?
Yeah,
And this put you on probation.
for a little, yeah.
They put you on probation because of your poor performance, correct?
That was their reasoning, yes.
So when Blake didn't help you with this situation, you decided to look for another job. Is that right?
Not exactly. I began to look for another job because from then on, I knew I had no future at Lush.
Ms. Durst, you were fired from Lush Fertilizer, weren't you?
Yes,
And you got a job at Terrace Greenery, Lush Fertilizer's biggest competitor. Is that right?
it only made sense to still stay in the fertilizer industry.
And you took the job at Terrace Greenery, even though they made you sign a confidentiality agreement with Lush. Is that correct?
I had forgotten about the confidentiality agreement.
Is that a yes?
Sure, yeah.
And you knew Blake had bad blood with Terrace Greenery. Is that right?
Yeah, I suppose so.
So you applied to Terrace Greenery out of spite of Blake, correct?
Initially, but the reason why I took the job at Terrace Greenery was because I knew it made
Thank you,
sense.
Ms. Durst. No further questions.
I'm going to let this witness finish her answer. You did cut her off. You did ask the question. She has an entitled obligation to answer the question. Will you finish with your answer, or would you like to add anything to your answer?
That's fine, Your Honor.
Okay. Any redirect?
Yes, briefly, Your Honor. And can I confirm that you can all hear me clearly? Otherwise, I can turn off my video once again.
We hear you fine.
All right, thank you. Ms. Durst, how long did you work at Lush Fertilizer?
3 years.
And did you sign the non-compete and non-disclosure agreement, or when did you sign that?
I honestly have no clue. I assume at the beginning, but I don't know since I forgot about it.
And you, and when did all of the complaints about your job performance start?
They started after I had found the research suggesting that Truffaut may be carcinogenic.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Thank you for your testimony, and you may step down, and the plaintiff may call their next witness.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff calls Dr. Casey Rogers to the stand.
That's fine. Is that witness in the courtroom?
Yes, Your Honor, we're just changing the name real quick.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's fine.
Dr. Rogers? Dr. Rogers, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
You understand, doctor, that you're under oath here today in the courtroom?
Yes.
Okay, you may proceed with the direct exam.
Dr. Rogers, could you please state your name and spell out your last name for the record?
My name is Dr. Casey Rogers, Rogers.
And Dr. Rogers, could you tell us what you do for a living?
I am currently a professor at UC Berkeley. And in my free time, I also like to conduct studies on certain chemicals that I believe need further testing.
And what kind of education did you receive?
I got my Bachelor's of Science at Colorado State University, and I got my PhD in entomology and agriculture at US Berkeley.
Dr. Rogers, have you done any publications?
Yes, I've done several publications, a majority of which are on the Drufo compound.
And what kind of, what do these publications entail?
Several of the publications entail Drufo's reactions and effects with certain things, and I even conducted a study on Drufo's effects to the human body.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to admit Dr. Casey Rogers as an expert in entomology, horticulture, and the effects of chemicals on the human body.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense objects to Dr. Casey Rogers being entered as an expert witness in the effects on the human body.
And you have no objections on the other two areas?
No. No, Your Honor.
Response?
Your Honor, Dr. Casey Rogers has shown his skill and expertise in the realm of chemicals effects on the human body, as he has done publications and a study in that area. Therefore, he has demonstrated he has the necessary skills and experience within that field. And he only needs to meet one of the requirements to be admitted as an expert in that area.
Well, I don't see that Dr. Rogers has any medical training. If you'd like to try to add do a little more foundation, lay a little more foundation, I'll consider it. But at this point, based on the foundation you've established so far, I'm not going to let him testify on the effect of the human body unless he shows me some more qualifications, and you can cite me some law to that effect. Would you like to lay some foundation?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Dr. Casey Rogers, did you research Drufo and its side effects while creating your publications?
Yes, so that is in fact part of what I do. I research Drufo and its effects on the human body, of which I have done numerous times. And I believe I'm well equipped on the effects of chemicals on the human body.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to admit Dr. Casey Rogers as an expert in horticulture, entomology, and the effects of chemicals on the human body, as he has demonstrated the necessary skills, knowledge, and experience to do so. Right, just now he demonstrated that he has the necessary knowledge to testify as an expert on the effects of chemicals on the human body.
Well, we've already accepted him in the areas of the first two. We're just talking about the effect on the human body. Defense counsel, do you have any comments based on the additional foundation that was been laid?
Your Honor, Dr. Rogers, it was not established Dr. Rogers' medical expertise in that field. I stand by my objection.
Well, I don't believe he has any medical expertise in that area, but however, rules of 702 and 703 don't require specific medical testimony in that area or qualifications. I'm going to let him testify and let his qualifications or lack of qualifications be subject for cross-examination and for the jury to decide. I'm going to allow him to testify at this point. Please proceed with your direct exam.
Dr. Rogers, what got your attention about the Drufo compound?
Well, Drufo caught my attention because I believe that it was rushed to the market too soon and that it needed further testing, which is why I did conduct further testing on the Drufo compound.
And do you wish to pursue further litigation on the Drufo compound?
Yes, I do plan on doing so. That way, more people won't have to go through what Dakota Weirs is suffering right now.
And what is Dakota Weirs suffering?
She is suffering from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a type of cancer that severely affects the body and has numerous outcomes.
Let's move on to your study. What kind of study did you do?
I did a research study on 3 main groups of people who have never been exposed to Drufo, another group that was only exposed to Drufo on various occasions, and a third group who used it in their day-to-day life. And from that, we concluded that the group that was experiencing Drufo the most was 15 times more likely to get cancer than people who have never been exposed to Drufo. And people who are exposed to Drufo on occasions were 10 times more likely to get cancer than people who have never been exposed to the Drufo compound.
And how does Miss Dakota's case compare to your study, the groups in your study?
I reviewed her medical records and that of some of the people in my study, and they do match in several aspects, which is why I believe that her non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is due to her exposure to the Drufo compound.
And just to reemphasize, in your expert opinion, what caused Ms. Dakota's non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
The Drufo compound that the Rush company created.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination. Proceed.
Hello, Dr. Rogers. Dr. Rogers, you were hired to testify for plaintiff, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
It is also true that this is your first time testifying as an expert witness in court, right?
Yes, that is true.
You do not have any medical expertise, correct?
In a sense, as while I did not go to college to get a degree, I have been, through my work, I have been exposed to several studies which require a medical expertise, as I have to go through the records and go through results to determine certain outcomes.
However, you are not a medical doctor, are you?
That is correct. I didn't get a PhD in the human body.
You conducted your own study on Drufo, right?
Yes, I thought that it was unsafe, so I conducted my own study.
This study solely focused on Drufo and not on lush fertilizer, correct?
As there's no need to research the entire company. Yes, I just researched the compound that I found to be too rushed to market.
Also said that Drufo is known to be carcinogenic in rats, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
You have not seen any scientific evidence other than your own study suggesting that Drufo is carcinogenic in humans, correct?
That is correct.
Your study had 3 groups, correct?
Yes, it did.
And this was also conducted over a few years, right?
Yes, this was a couple years ago.
You monitored the health effects and concluded that there was a correlation between individuals who were exposed to Drufo and an increased risk of cancer, right?
Yes, there's an extreme correlation between the Drufo compound and the people who were exposed to it.
You didn't compare individuals exposed to Drufo to individuals exposed to other pesticides, did you?
No, as it was best to see if just the Drufo compound, which I didn't really need to compare to other fertilizers to see if it was the result.
And you didn't rule out other environmental factors that might have contributed to the risk of cancer, correct?
Well, I did my best to try to limit the amount of factors that were in the study and have the people primarily using Drufo and be experiencing similar lifestyles.
So is that a yes?
Yes, that is a yes.
There are other environmental variables that might similarly impact those exposed to Drufo, correct?
In some cases, that is correct.
And correlation is not the same thing as causation, is it?
No, it is not.
Now, Dr. Rogers, you concluded that those who were exposed to Drufo came into contact with the chemical by primarily breathing the substance in. Isn't that right?
Yes, that was one of the main forms.
You also discovered that individuals could be exposed to Drufo through contact with the skin, correct?
Yes, that is also correct.
After your study was complete, you made recommendations to reduce the exposure to Drufo, correct?
Yes.
Which focus on individuals wearing proper clothing, right?
Yes, wearing certain clothing may help them from getting cancer like Dakota Weirs.
It is your understanding that Weirs was exposed to Drufo without wearing proper protective equipment, right?
That is not entirely correct, as I believe shown before. The Lush company never required you to wear any protective clothing to block out the Drufo compound. It was just a suggestion that you should wear longer clothing.
However, in your testimony, you said that to your understanding, Dakota was exposed to Drufo without wearing proper clothing, right?
Yes.
Weirs was exposed to several different chemicals regularly for 4 consecutive years, right?
I believe so.
You said there was a high degree of probability that Weirs' medical condition comes as a result of being exposed to Drufo, correct?
That is correct.
But you don't know whether or not the cancer was caused by Drufo or one of the other chemicals that Dakota was exposed to, correct?
In a sense, as I believe that it's more than likely that her cancer is a direct result of the Drufo compound.
And you don't know if the cancer was caused by some other environmental factor, do you?
It very well could be, but non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is primarily caused by the falling stuff in the fertilizers.
But non-Hodgkin lymphoma is also comes as a result of environmental exposure, correct?
Yes, in some cases, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Your Honor, no further questions for this witness.
Redirect,
Yes, Your Honor.
proceed.
Dr. Rogers, how strong was the correlation that you found in your study?
It was extremely strong, as I already told you guys my test results on the study that I conducted.
And how does that strong correlation, what does that strong correlation imply about your opinion on, your expert opinion on Dakota Weirs' case?
Well, in my expert opinion, I do believe that Dakota Weirs' cancer is a direct result of her exposure to the Drufo compound. After conducting my study and seeing the health results of those in it and Dakota Weirs'.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any recross?
No recross, Your Honor.
Okay, Dr. Rogers, you may be excused. And plaintiff, do you have another witness or are you ready to rest?
No, the plaintiff rests their case.
Okay, at this time, the plaintiffs have rested the presentation of their evidence and the defendant will move on to the defendant's presentation of their case. Counsel for defendant, would you call your first witness, please?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Blake Doncourt to the stand.
You understand you're under oath here?
Yes, I do.
I'm sorry. Proceed.
Thank you.
And Orchard Witness, can you guys mute? You have two computers going on and there's really bad backfeed. Can you mute one of the other computers, please?
I can't hear anybody now.
Hello,
There we
hear me
go.
now? Okay.
I think we're okay. Proceed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Doncourt. Please state and spell your name for the jury.
Blake Doncourt, BlakeDoncourt.
Thank you, Mr. Doncourt. Mr. Doncourt, what do you do for a living?
I'm CEO of Lush Fertilizer.
What does Lush Fertilizer do?
We're an eco-friendly fertilizer company.
What products do you make?
Mostly in the field of fertilizers, products that for landscaping.
What is your flagship product?
Lush Fertilizer.
How is Lush Fertilizer used?
It's used by an assortment of people, from small businesses all the way to governments that trust our product.
Mr. Doncourt, I would now like to discuss how you move your products through the development process. How do you move a product through the development stages?
Well, we have a multitude of stages. We have the research and development, which is our toxicology department. And we have the EPA also look at our findings.
What do these measures ensure?
They mostly ensure user safety, and we can have something sustainable and just no hazards in our products.
Who else reviews the product?
Like I said, the EPA.
And what does the EPA look for?
Anything harmful, hazardous, toxic. They go through an assortment of things before they allow us to put those on the shelves.
Did Lush Fertilizer go through each of these stages?
We went through each of these phases extensively.
What is the most prominent chemical in the product?
The most prominent chemical is Drufo.
Do you believe Drufo is dangerous?
After all our findings in the EPA, well, no, I don't.
You mentioned research was conducted on Drufo. What did the research on the fertilizer find about Drufo specifically?
Well, the research didn't find anything conclusive, but nothing much besides like little minute hazards, but all those safe.
Did the EPA find any toxicity in the fertilizer?
No, the EPA didn't find anything.
Did your company put a warning label on the fertilizer?
Yes, we did. Even though we didn't have to by state law, we decided that we should have a label just for user safety.
Is there anything you could do to guarantee that your fertilizer would not be carcinogenic?
It would be to bake the fertilizer.
Did your company bake the fertilizer?
No, it was such a minute hazard that there was really no like sensible way to bake the fertilizer. It'd just be too cost effective.
Thank you, Mr. Doncourt. I would now like to discuss a former employee of yours. Mr. Doncourt, are you familiar with a former employee of yours, Carson Durst?
Yes, I am.
What department did Ms. Durst work under during their time at Lush?
Well, we had Carson work as intern. And, we had Carson do their own studies.
What were some of Ms. Durst's responsibilities?
To conduct her studies and write down any information in her journal.
Did Ms. Durst ever approach you with any information regarding any product?
She had every opportunity, but never did.
Do you know where Ms. Durst saw employment after their time at Lush?
As a matter of fact, at our biggest competitor, Terrace Greenery.
Now, Mr. Doncourt, let's discuss the reason why we are all here today. What do you know about the plaintiff, Dakota Weirs?
She's a young, talented woman who was infected with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
What is your understanding of Dakota Weirs' non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Well, I know that it's not a genetic disease and it has to be brought on by another variable throughout life.
Thank you, Mr. Doncourt. Your Honor, no further questions for this witness.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
Mr. Doncourt, you previously stated that you put a warning label on your product, correct?
Under federal and state law, no, I did not have to, but I did just to ensure user safety.
At this time, let the record reflect, I'm having the witness refer to Exhibit 1, which has already been admitted into evidence.
That's fine.
If you would read along with me, if you would read along with me, the only thing that is close to a warning is user safety recommendations. Recommendations are not the same as warnings, correct?
Excuse me, you wanted me to read along with you? I'm a little confused.
Let me rephrase. Mr. Doncourt, as you see on the Lush fertilizer label, it says user safety recommendations. Recommendations are not the same as warnings, correct?
Yes, they are recommendations.
So is that a yes to my question?
Oh, yes.
Moving on. Mr. Doncourt, when making decisions in your company, you take profit into account, correct?
Yes, because it is a company, I have to take profit into account, so yes.
And when working out these decisions, you create profit reports, correct?
Yes, I do.
And
yes.
You use these profit reports in making your decisions?
Yeah, it gives me a better sense of what I can do. So yes, I do use this to make better decisions.
And did you make one of these for baking?
As a matter of fact, I did.
And do you create profit reports whenever you create a new product at your company?
Well, I make product reports where I deem necessary, yes.
And you read and review all these profit reports?
Are you referring to the one about baking? Because I made that one.
Yes.
Oh, then the answer is yes.
And all decisions and yeah. And any and all, and you have the final say in decisions at your company, correct?
Can you elaborate on that question?
Yes, I'm just asking if the decisions you make based on profit reports, do you have the final say of those in your company?
Well, it's more on the terms of I make the decision and whatever is the best decision I deem fit. So I have my investors. So I would say I possibly do. That's the last say.
Let the record reflect that I am showing the witness, Mr. Blake Doncourt, what is an unmarked copy of Exhibit 8.
That exhibit has not been admitted yet. I do not wish you to publish it until you move for its admission. I understand you're showing it to the witness, but it should not be published to the court until it's been admitted. So if Mr. Doncourt can identify it and authenticate it, then you can publish it to the court.
Mr. Doncourt, do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
And is it a true and accurate copy of the profit report you made for baking?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to admit Exhibit 8 into evidence.
Well, what is it? I don't think he's authenticated it, but we still don't know what it is. Did he identify the exhibit, what the chart is?
I believe he identified it as the profit report he made for baking the product.
Okay. Any objection to the admission of this exhibit?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, the Exhibit 8, the amortization table cost savings by the use of DuPo is now admitted with no objections. You may publish that exhibit to the jury now at this point.
Publish, sure. Mr. Doncourt, may I direct your attention to the last column within your profit report. It's titled Estimate Overall Revenue Loss, correct?
Correct.
And at the bottom of that column, it says that you're projected to lose $2.6 million over 10 years, correct?
Yes.
And Mr. Doncourt, when making decisions of your company, you weigh the cons and the pros of the decision, correct?
Yes, weighing the pros and cons are a very key aspect in making decisions, yes.
And in this case, one of the cons is losing profit, correct?
If you're referring to the baking of the fertilizer, yes, it would be losing profit.
And one of the pros of deciding to bake would be eliminating any and all risk within your product, correct?
It would be eliminating any minute hazards because it is fertilizer, it's dirt. So yes, there would be hazards within the dirt, but they're just small, so yeah.
And you never baked your product, correct?
No, I did not bake my product.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Yes, a brief redirect, Your Honor. Mr. Doncourt, the plaintiff's attorney was asking you about the amortization table. Tell me, what is the purpose of a table like that?
Well, it's to ensure our costs, profits, things of the sort. So I know what I'm doing with my company.
If you knew that your fertilizer was linked to cancer, Would that change your decision on whether or not to bake the product?
Oh, absolutely. It would change my decision. There's so many factors into it that if I were to have the knowledge that it was carcinogenic, there would be so much more. I would spend no expense at fixing that right away.
Thank you, Mr. Doncourt. Your Honor, no further questions for this witness.
Is there any, this witness is then excused. Dr. Rogers, was there any follow-up or do you have any? Are you completed with the witness? Dr. Rogers, you're excused at this point in time, and the plaintiff may call the next witness.
We call Dr. Devin Williams to the stand.
You may proceed.
Good evening. Could you please state your name for the record? Good evening. My name is Devin Williams. Ms. Williams, I am first going to ask you about your expertise. What is your role with respect to this case? I am head of toxicology, research and development labs at Lush Fertilizer, and I'm part of the outgoing chair of the company's ethics committee. What is your educational background? I obtained my undergrad and my doctorate at Colorado State University in Fort Collins at the College of Pharmacy and Allied Health Professions. Did you get any postgraduate degrees? Yes, I did a specialized post-PhD program in pharmacotoxicology at the University of Utah. What did your education lead to? I now hold minor certificates in toxicology in Colorado, New Mexico, Wyoming, and Utah. And can you please describe your professional career? I have been a toxicologist since 1993 and was medical chief examiner for 2 years. What did you do in that role? I would use forensic toxicological techniques to analyze human samples collected at autopsy. And what was the purpose of performing these tasks? I can determine how toxic chemicals like drugs can cause death. What did you do after you were the chief medical examiner? I was an assistant professor at the University of Colorado at Anschutz Medical School. Then in 2003, I left to teach at Colorado State University at the School of Pharmacy and Allied Health Professions. This is where I currently work at right now. And what courses do you teach? I teach forensic toxicology 1 and 2, the principles of forensic toxicology, in a class called Toxicology of Environmental and Occupational Chemicals. Do you do any research as part of your work as a professor? Yes, I'm a research toxicologist by training and work to understand how biological systems respond to environmental toxins. Can you tell us what this means? Well, I look at the effects substance has on the human body, such as alcohol effects in neurochemical pathways, in organic compounds, and let me rephrase that really quick. Well, I look at the effects substance has on the human body, such as alcohol effects, interventions in neurochemical pathways, in inorganic compounds, and agriculture enhancing organ phosphorus products. Thank you for the explanation. Do you do anything else in addition to teaching? Yes, I work at Lush. What do you do at Lush Fertilizer? I have led the labs for almost 7 years. And what has your work experience as a toxicologist taught you? Through my training experience, I can determine how
toxic chemical agents can affect the human body and how to neutralize them if it does come to happen.
At this time, Your Honor, I would move to admit Dr. Devin Williams as an expert in toxicology.
Any voir dire, plaintiffs?
No, Your Honor.
Any objection to this qualifications as a toxicologist?
Not at this time.
Well, this time is your one time. You either do it now or not. If he'll be allowed to testify as a toxicologist and for all purposes from this point forward, if there is no objection.
I understand, Your Honor. I'll address this witness's deficiencies in my cross-examination.
Okay. Dr. Rogers is admitted as an expert witness for the purpose of this case in the area of toxicology.
Can you tell me more about when you joined Lush?
When I joined Lush, I was a technician, but later on got promoted to lead the labs.
What was your job as leader of labs?
My job at this point was to oversee how Lush products are environmentally impactful and how Lush products can stay industry-leading, environmental aware, and cost-effective.
And how does fertilizer impact the environment?
Fertilizer causes something called eutrophication. Eutrophication is a buildup of nutrients in bodies of water caused by soil and bacteria, especially something called nitrates. It kills fish and is harmful to humans.
And how does eutrophication happen?
The unused fertilizer converts into nitrates. Then those nitrates are carried into streams and lakes by rain and irrigation runoff.
How does DRUFO combat eutrophication?
Lush developed DRUFO as a new generation of fertilizers, so less fertilizer needs to be applied because DRUFO binds the fertilizer to the grass and results less fertilizer washes away into the soil.
Ms. Williams, is DRUFO banned anywhere?
Yes, it is banned in the European Union because it still contains nitrogen. In labs, it looks like it adds nitrates to the environment when it really doesn't.
In your expert opinion, should DRUFO be banned?
In my expert opinion, I think DRUFO should not be banned. And the ban was not due to any cancer risk.
Can you tell me more about DRUFO not being connected to cancer risks?
Of course, the use of DRUFO has not been correlated with any statistical significant increase in the incidence of non-Hodgkin lymphoma or any other cancers.
What method did you use for your statistical analysis?
The right statistical approach is to look at the incidence rate of non-Hodgkin lymphoma in groups of people who use fertilizers with DRUFO, and look at the incidence rate of people who use different products.
And why is this the best method?
This makes sense because both groups of people are working in the same conditions.
And have you reviewed the research conducted by Dr. Rogers relating to DRUFO and cancer?
Yes, I have. I don't think Dr. Rogers' results are reliable.
Why not?
Well, Dr. Rogers compared farm laborers to casual who use products with DRUFO to casual gardeners who use products containing DRUFO.
And can you please explain a little bit more about this?
Yes, sorry. Dr. Rogers didn't use the proper methods when conducting his study. He had to compare apples to apples. He compared people who are farm laborers who use products with DRUFO to casual gardeners who use products containing DRUFO to people who don't do any work with plants. But the difference isn't only just the fertilizers they use. They live totally different lifestyles and are exposed to different things. So there are a lot of things that can explain the difference.
Thank you. And finally, do you have any other concerns with Dr. Rogers' study?
Yes, Dr. Rogers' study has not been peer-reviewed or replicated. Without peer review, it is hard to tell if Dr. Rogers used the proper methods when conducting his study. And without replication, his study could have just been a fluke.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect? Any redirect for this witness?
Your Honor, I believe it's time for cross-examination.
I apologize. I meant, is there any cross-examination, please? I got ahead
It's
of
completely
myself.
all right, Your Honor, and
Yeah.
yes, there is.
Please, start and I've wasted one of your minutes, so the timekeeper should not count that against you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Williams, you have worked at Lush Fertilizer for about 7 years now, right?
Yeah, give or take.
And during those years, you've worked overseeing their development of the product Drufo?
Yes.
And this is the main part of your professional experience, isn't it?
Can you elaborate on that question?
You've developed Drufo for about 7 years, right? So it's one of the cornerstones of your professional experience.
With Lush, yeah. But
And
not
so-
my professional career.
Remind me, how long have you worked as a toxicologist?
Since 1993.
Okay. But you've spent about the last decade working with Lush and Drufo in particular, haven't you?
Yeah, I guess so.
And you're proud of the work that you've done with that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question? You just kind of cut off really quick.
Are you proud of the work that you've done on that product?
Yes, I think Drufo is great, and I think Lush is a great company.
But it would damage your credibility a little bit if Lush, or rather Lush's product Drufo, was found to be carcinogenic, wouldn't it?
I guess so.
And you, Lush Fertilizer pays you for the work that you do for them, don't they?
Yeah, I work for them, so.
And if Lush Fertilizer's product was found to be carcinogenic, that would be potentially harmful to the company, wouldn't it?
It would be harmful, but yeah, it just would be harmful, I guess.
So if Lush Fertilizer was harmed and they pay you, then this product's being found to be carcinogenic could also be harmful to your monetary income too, wouldn't it?
Well, I have another job, so I'm not really worried about my income right now.
But Lush Fertilizer pays you, and if they were harmed by the outcome of this case, that would impact your monetary income, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would impact some of my income, but I still have another job that I get money from.
All right. Moving on. You are very familiar with all of the different components of Lush Fertilizer, right?
Yeah.
And you're familiar with what all of those different components can do to people as a toxicologist?
Well, I hope so.
And you're aware that Lush Fertilizer contains nitrogen, aren't you?
Yeah, but so little, like compared to other fertilizers.
And you're aware that nitrogen is a known carcinogen, aren't you?
Yes, but it still contains a little bit of nitrogen. So,
And Drufo sticks to nitrogen?
Can you elaborate on that question? I'm confused.
Drufo sticks to nitrogen, doesn't it?
Can you reword that? I'm sorry.
The reason that you in your prior to that soak the environment is because it sticks to plants and prevents, or rather it sticks nitrogen to plants and prevents it from running into water to prevent eutrophication.
I'm sorry, you
doesn't
cut
it?
off like for the entire question. Like, so can you repeat that again? So sorry.
Your Honor, am I cutting out a lot? Should I turn off my camera once more?
You were cut off at the beginning, but the rest of the question did come through fine. So just keep going. I think it's gonna come through okay.
Alrighty.
Just to maybe talk a little slower.
Alrighty, I'll repeat the question for you, Dr. Devin Williams. In the prior testimony that you've provided, you've stated that the reason that Drufo is so wonderful for the environment is because it causes nitrogen to stick to plants and prevents nitrogen from flowing into water to prevent eutrophication. Correct?
That would be correct.
So Drufo causes nitrogen to stick to organic material, yes?
Yeah.
Would you qualify humans as organic material?
Please describe that question really quick.
Would you consider people to be organic?
I guess.
Alrighty. No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect, please, any?
I have no redirect, Your Honor.
Okay, with no redirect and there's no recross, so Doctor, you're excused, and the defense, you have one additional witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense would like to call Skyler Weirs to the stand.
Ms. Weir, you understand you're under oath at this time? Ms. Weir, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Understanding that you're under oath, we may proceed with direct examination of this witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good evening, Ms. Weirs. May you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, my name is Skyler Weirs.
Ms. Weirs, what is your relation with the plaintiff, Dakota Weirs?
Dakota is my fraternal twin.
Ms. Weirs, what is your occupation?
I'm an investigative journalist. I'm an investigative journalist for a magazine.
What kind of magazine?
I write for The Rationalist, a science education magazine.
As an investigative journalist, what kind of research do you do?
Well, recently I've done extensive research on the conflict between individual health and corporate policy.
And have you done any other work related to this topic?
Yes, I also wrote an article about the narrative that there's a causal link between Drufo and cancer.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. I would like to ask about your experience in this field. Can you tell me how you came to be knowledgeable about agricultural chemicals like Drufo?
Yes, my editor assigned me to write a series of articles of agricultural technology, including things like Drufo.
And can you tell the jury what you mean when you say agritech?
Of course, agritech is short for agricultural technology, which is things like pesticides, fertilizers, genetically modified organisms, also known as GMOs, and other technology.
So what kind of research did you do in preparation for writing those articles?
I spent around a year researching.
And what exactly did you research?
Well, first I went to the publications that are made by the agricultural technology companies themselves to see what they put out.
And did you stop there?
No, I also went into the publications and saw the research studies that were made, and I tracked them down to see what they said.
And Ms. Weirs, were there any other resources?
Yes, lastly, I saw the NASDA and the US.
Ms. Weirs, how else are you knowledgeable about agritech?
Well, my knowledge is general, statistical, and historical. I also stay up to date with current issues of modern agricultural technology that is released.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense offers Skyler Weirs as an expert regarding modern agritech. The defense has now complied with the court's pretrial ruling and has offered sufficient evidence and has established her qualifications as an expert witness.
Any objections?
Yes, Your Honor, may I conduct a brief audio?
You may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, you didn't go to college, correct?
No, I did not.
And you have no formal training on this subject, correct?
I do not, but I did do extensive research.
Self-conducted research, right?
No, I did not.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you saying that you did no research?
I did do research, but actually, could you rephrase what your question was?
Yeah, it was just no formal research. You did it on your own, right?
Yes, I did do my research on my own when I was researching on my technology on what the articles were released about.
And your research consisted of, Ms. Weirs, it looks like you keep muting. Sorry, I don't know if you're having tech issues. Do you need me to pause?
No, we're good.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Let me restate that question. Your research is reviewing other experts' publishings, correct?
Correct.
So you review primary sources and write your own, correct?
Yes, I review what they say and then I write.
So that would make you a secondary source, right?
Yes, I'm a secondary source from a main source that is valuable.
And you have never worked directly with chemical, correct?
No, I did not work directly with the chemical.
And you've never performed any experiments of your own, any tests?
No, I did not perform any tests, but as I said before, I did research on it.
Your Honor, at this time, I object to Ms. Skyler Weirs being admitted as an expert, as she does not exhibit the requisite skills, knowledge, and experience needed. She has only studied for merely a year, and that is about the same amount of time that a high school student would study a subject, and that makes them no expert either.
She's being offered as an expert in the area of agricultural, modern agriculture, and she's not being offered as an expert in the science or the medicine. And for that purpose, I'm going to allow her to be admitted and testify in the area of modern agriculture. Your objection is noted but overruled. Proceed with direct examination, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, have you ever heard of DRUFO?
Yes, I have heard of DRUFO.
And is DRUFO an example of modern agritech?
Yes, DRUFO is an example of modern agritech.
And can you tell us exactly what DRUFO is?
Yes, DRUFO is an incredibly effective bonding agent, which just means plants don't need as much fertilizer to be treated.
And how does DRUFO work?
Well, first it bonds to an active plant and the chemicals inside of the fertilizer and just make sure it doesn't get washed away, which basically means it only needs to be applied once or twice a year instead of 5 to 6 times as other fertilizers.
And does it do anything else?
Yes, it is also a very effective pesticide, which just means it doesn't contain any cancerous pesticides that we're known of.
And what kind of cancerous pesticides are those?
Arsenic, which is known to cause cancer in humans, and glyphosate, which is likely to cause cancer.
Ms. Weirs, in your research, did you see any evidence of DRUFO containing these cancerous pesticides?
No, it's inconclusive at best. I haven't found any research articles that saying that DRUFO does cause cancer or it doesn't. So DRUFO actually protects its users instead of endangering them.
Lastly, Ms. Weirs, why are you testifying for the defense side instead of your siblings?
I feel terrible about what happened to Dakota, but if she wore the proper gear, or actually if Haven Landscaping required the proper gear, we wouldn't have been in this situation that we're in right now.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. No further questions.
Cross-examination, please.
Yes, Your Honor, may I proceed?
Yes.
Ms. Weirs, you have a pretty serious gambling problem, don't you?
Yes, everyone has their vices, but I'm working on it right now. Like I said, I'm an investigative journalist and I'm also working at Applebee's.
So you're in a hole financially, correct?
Can you repeat
Objection, Your
that?
Honor, relevance.
It's, I'd ask, what's the relevance of this issue?
It goes to the motive behind Ms. Weirs testifying for Lush Fertilizer today, as if Lush Fertilizer loses this case, her writings will be discredited and she will lose money in this crucial financial time.
Well, she's already testified that she's having financial problems. I don't understand what the working at Applebee's would have to do with anything. I'm going to strike the last question and ask you to limit yourself to the fact that she's having financial problems. Where she's working is the objection is sustained.
Your Honor, I don't believe I asked if she worked at Applebee's. I think she just added that in on her own.
Well, let's you can ask generally about financial conditions, but not specifics with regards to anything beyond that. So I stand corrected, and I appreciate you pointing that out. Please proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. So, Ms. Weirs, you write that Drufo causes cancer, correct? Or I mean, doesn't cause cancer. Sorry.
Yes, I did write because it, as I said before, it's inconclusive if it can cause cancer.
And you make money off of these publishings?
Can you rephrase that?
Ms. Weirs, you publish articles and make money off of those.
Correct. It is my job, to be an investigative journalist and write a series of articles.
So if Lush loses this case, you would be proven wrong that Drufo doesn't cause cancer, correct?
Objection, speculation.
Response from
Sorry, if I may ask, what part of it was speculation?
the question itself was speculative. I'm going to sustain the objection. Please ask your next question.
Okay, so Ms. Weirs, Ms. Weirs, it would be in your best interest if Lush won this case, correct?
I mean, as an investigative journalist, I guess you could say yes, because I've done extensive research on this, so it will be proving my point of what I've been doing this whole time for about a year.
Thank you. Moving on. Ms. Weirs, pesticides are poisonous, right?
Yes, pesticides are poisonous.
And you are aware that Drufo is in Lush Fertilizer?
Yes, I am aware that pesticides are inside of Drufo.
And Drufo is a pesticide, correct?
Yes, Drufo is a pesticide, but it's not a dangerous one that contains anything that's, well, cancer.
But pesticides in and of themselves are poisonous, right?
Yes, to plants.
So, well, to any organisms, correct?
Yes, any organisms.
So anyone using Lush Fertilizer would be in turn using poison, correct?
Can you repeat that?
Anyone using Lush Fertilizer would in turn be using poison.
Yes.
And Ms. Weirs, the tests that found if Drufo causes cancer were inconclusive, correct?
Yes. It was inconclusive. It's okay. You can.
Sorry. So you don't know if Drufo doesn't cause cancer, correct?
Yes, as I said before, it's inconclusive. There's nothing that says it will or will not.
Thank you. And Ms. Weirs, other companies use synthetic nitrogen, correct?
Yes.
Whereas Lush fertilizer uses real nitrogen.
Yes, it does use real nitrogen.
And Ms. Weirs, you are aware that nitrogen causes cancer, correct?
Yes, I am.
So anyone using Lush fertilizer is in danger of cancer, correct?
Yes, they're endangered, but I haven't found anything that says they are or not.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor, no redirect.
Okay, with no reject, there's no recross. Doctor, you're excused, and this concludes, I believe this concludes the presentation of evidence. The parties need to prepare themselves to do closing statements, starting with the plaintiffs. Let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready, Your Honor. May I proceed with my closing argument?
You may.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today, opposing counsel is attempting to conclusions. But the truth is that we have the facts. In a few minutes, you're going to be handed a set of jury instructions, which, among other things, will tell you exactly what we have the burden of proof to show you today. Jury instruction number 2 outlines this pretty clearly. It says that we have to prove to you that 1, my client, Dakota Weirs, was damaged. 2, that those damages were sustained because of a product that Lush Fertilizer created. And 3, that Lush Fertilizer knew that their product had the potential to cause my client these damages and failed to act to protect her. We have proven all of those things to you today. 1, that Ms. Weirs was damaged. Absolutely no one in this courtroom has been able to contest that. You all heard Ms. Weirs tell you how she is in an appalling level of pain, and you watched her squirm in her chair as a result of that pain throughout her entire testimony. 2, that pain that she's currently experiencing was caused because of a product created by Lush Fertilizer. Today, you heard from Carson Durst, an expert in his field with nearly 2 decades of experience. He told you exactly how he conducted a study that conclusively proved that Drufo is a carcinogen. And you also heard from Dr. Devin Williams, the very same scientist that Lush Fertilizer chose to represent them in court today, who told you that yet another component of Lush Fertilizer, nitrogen, is a carcinogen. And you also heard him tell you that Drufo makes nitrogen stick to people, which means that Drufo is both a carcinogen itself and makes another carcinogen stick to people, which means that directly or indirectly, Drufo is the root cause of my client's cancer. Lush Fertilizer's product is the root cause of all the pain that my client is currently enduring. And 3, that Lush Fertilizer knew that their product had the potential to cause all of this harm. Today, you heard from Carson Durst, who told you how during their time at the company, they saw another study conducted in England that raised their concern that the product could be carcinogenic, that they relayed that information to their employer, and that Lush Fertilizer thought that information was concerning enough to conduct their own study. You heard how the results of that study, as relayed by one of their own scientists, told them that not only was Drufo a carcinogen, but that it could also cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma, coincidentally the very same illness that my client is sick with today. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we have met our burden of proof, and we have provided it to you with all facts. And for that reason, I ask you to find in favor of my client today. Thank you.
Thank you. Defense, do you have a closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Probability, not possibility. Causation, not correlation. Jury instruction number 10 asks that any fact you find must be based on probabilities, not possibilities. The plaintiff's entire argument is based on the possibility that Drufo led to Dakota Weirs' condition, based on the idea that there is a link between Drufo and cancer. But let me remind you that correlation is not causation. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Alyssa Avila, and I, along with my co-counsel, represent Lush Fertilizer Incorporated. As my co-counsel told you at the start of this trial, the plaintiff is asking you to jump to a conclusion, to find someone to blame for the unfair fact that Dakota Weirs has cancer. We are asking you not to jump to the wrong conclusion. Let's review the evidence you have received in this case. You heard from one of Mr. Doncourt's former employees who was fired from the company. Not only was Carson Durst fired, but they also sought employment from the competitor, Terrace Greenery. Carson Durst wants you to believe that they were fired for being a whistleblower, but all you have to do is look at Ms. Durst's testimony to realize the information she claimed to have is unreliable, based on speculation, not solid scientific research. You also heard from Dr. Casey Rogers, a first-time expert witness in court who claims Drufo is carcinogenic. The only foundation for this claim is from a study that was conducted on rats. Dr. Rogers then conducted his own study to examine whether or not Drufo is carcinogenic in humans. This study was inconclusive, not peer-reviewed, nor was it duplicated. Dr. Rogers found no concrete evidence to support their claim. You heard the plaintiff, Dakota Weirs, a talented young individual whose life has done a 180 as a result of being diagnosed with cancer. Dakota worked in the landscaping industry, where coming into contact with various chemicals is a given. While watching TV, Dakota saw a news story that suggested Drufo led to cancer. And what did Dakota do? Feeling devastated with their diagnosis and understandably eager to blame someone, Dakota jumped to the conclusion that Lush and Drufo were to blame. Now you heard from our three witnesses, Mr. Doncourt, Dr. Williams, and Skyler Weirs, all of whom are driven by passion, a moral code, and a feeling of responsibility for the greater good. Mr. Doncourt, CEO of Lush Fertilizer, ensures his products are clean, safe, and eco-friendly. He explained the various stages that each product at Lush undergoes, including the fertilizer, the extensive research, the thorough toxicology analysis, and the review done by the EPA, a government agency, all of which led to the sound and reasonable conclusion that Lush Fertilizer is safe. The brains of the company, Dr. Williams, explained her credibility of her research and why her work is valid, concrete, and trustworthy. Dr. Williams, an experienced toxicologist, also explained why Dr. Rogers' study is flawed as they jump to invalid conclusions, which contrasts Dr. Williams' sound approach when evaluating the evidence. Skyler Weirs explained her reasoning as to why her research and testimony today are not acts of family betrayal, but of ethically motivated decisions. Skyler did not think twice about doing research on the product that allegedly gave her twin cancer. The results of this research, that Drufo and Lush Fertilizer are safe and do not cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Members of the jury, we as a defense are not diminishing the severity of the plaintiff, Dakota Weirs' condition, but rather are asking you to thoroughly weigh the facts to make an honest verdict. Do not jump to the hasty conclusion that plaintiff offers. The facts are clear and the facts are simple. Fact, non-Hodgkin lymphoma is carcinogenic in rats. Fact, non-Hodgkin lymphoma has a survival rate above 70%. Fact, Lush Fertilizer went through various stages of review and at no point did anyone find the product to be dangerous. The facts show that Dakota's condition was not caused by Drufo. Perhaps it was caused by Dakota's exposure to all of the other chemicals they used during their 4 years in the landscaping industry. Perhaps it was caused by some other environmental factor. The plaintiff did not meet the burden of proving it is probable that Dakota's cancer was caused by Drufo. You might conclude that it is possible, but let me remind you that correlation is not causation. Possibility is not probability. My co-counsel and I know that after weighing the information given to you, you will do your duty as honorable people of the court and find our client, Lush Fertilizer, not liable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rebuttal? You have some time for rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe I have 1 minute and 56 seconds. May I proceed?
Please proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case comes down to the totality of the evidence. And the evidence that you've been presented with today is that, one, Drufo is a carcinogen in and of itself, and that Lush fertilizer contains, in addition to Drufo, yet another carcinogen, nitrogen. Also, the Drufo makes nitrogen stick to people, and that that means that Drufo in and of itself is a carcinogen and causes another carcinogen to actively harm people. What that means is that Lush Fertilizer's product contains, and they failed to warn their customers. You saw the label on their product today, and you saw that the only warning was to ask their customers to wear mild protection in the form of eye goggles and maybe a mask to prevent the product from irritating them, not to prevent them from getting cancer. And that they only recommended that their clients protect themselves. They did not demand it. They did not require it. They did not ensure their client's safety. Yet they still knew. They knew that their products could cause cancer. They knew that their products could ruin lives just like it's ruining my clients. And they failed to warn them. They were negligent. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we have met our burden of proof, and we ask you to find in favor of our client. Thank you for your time.
That concludes the evidence and closing arguments. The case now stands submitted and it will proceed to the jury. I want to thank all the participants and the expert witnesses and the lay witnesses that took the time out of their day to come testify, and we'll have the decision shortly. Thank you all.
Thank you, Your Honor.
If everyone can hang out just until I am sure I have all of our score sheets, and then everyone can head out. To the students, if you guys want to watch, we will be doing, if you want to watch the live stream of this courtroom, so it's round 4, courtroom 1 for the awards. Your coaches should send you that link. If not, let me know. And then we can go from there. I just want to thank all of you for your very hard work and for making this so entertaining for all of us to watch, and to all of my volunteers. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We could never, ever do this without you all. So it is very much appreciated. And I will let Judge Lampert close it out and be quiet. I think I have everybody's sheets here. Iris, bear with me for 1 second. 2, 3. All right, we are good. I have all the score sheets.
I think, having listened to you all, I would like to have if the participants agree, have some feedback from the scoring judges, and I'll give you my 2 cents worth if you're willing to stay around and hear this. I think it would be beneficial for you. Timekeepers, select the one and get started and give a little feedback. Does anybody want to give feedback?
Scoring panelists, you want to jump on and give any feedback?
I'll give it a little feedback. This is Bill Wright. I'd like to congratulate everybody on a really fine performance. I would be happy to see any of you as associates in our firm.
That's a big deal, participants. Remember, when you graduate from law school, go see him. He has one of the finest law firms in the state. So get a recording of that and go see Bill. Any other feedback? Anything you want to comment on? Okay, any of the other timekeepers like to give some feedback? I don't have your names up, so I don't know who to ask for.
Sorry, Judge, it was my understanding we weren't giving feedback. I just want to say everyone did a great job, and I'm sure Judge Lampert here will have some great feedback for you.
I know you guys
Everybody
have
had
a
an
little bit of
opportunity.
time because you finished early, so you've got time for some feedback if you want it.
Anybody else? Otherwise, I'll take the floor.
Chris or Becky, you have any feedback?
Well, if you do jump in,
I'll
go
quick say
ahead.
something.
Yeah.
It's only positive feedback. You guys did a really good job. You're a lot better spoken than I was in high school, and maybe than I was 2 years ago in law school. So really good job, everybody. I'd offer you a job, but I have no hiring power. So
Okay, anybody else? I echo everybody. You guys do an absolutely wonderful job. And I competed in moot court in law school, and you're about to at the level of my law school class. So by the time you graduate from law school, who knows where you might be. The one thing I'm going to mention to you, because it might help you in your future competition, is, and I think it's not your problem as participants, but rather a problem with the way the case facts are designed. Any type of scientific or medical evidence that goes to the jury has to be to a probability, more likely than not, to a reasonable degree of medical probability and reasonable degree of scientific probability. And you have lots of testimony with regards to correlation and connected to or will cause or will not cause, but the probability standard has to be connected with evidence to go to the jury. Now, Miss Avila, I give her 5 stars. I don't know where she is right now. Raise your hand. That you did it in both opening and closing. You hit hard on the jury instruction on probability, and you required the evidence to be to a probability. That was nothing short of brilliance. I do medical malpractice and scientific and products liability cases. And the hardest, most difficult thing to do is to get opinions to a probability, more likely than not, or in some courtrooms to a reasonable degree of medical certainty. And that in this particular case, because the problem is not written to give you the information as to whether or not any of the expert witnesses have opinions that would be probable or not probable. So you got to kind of make it up on the fly. But in the absence of testimony to probability, hammer it home, and it certainly gives the defense, I think, an advantage. And Ms. Avila, you ran it right down their throats, and your closing argument was excellent, and you hit exactly what you should have been hitting with regard. It's not the plaintiff's fault because you don't have it in your statement of facts, so you don't know what kinds of questions to ask. And so, I mean, that's not any critique of any of the participants, but you might talk to your team coaches and your leaders about how to handle the issue of absence of case information regarding the standard and what you should do with your witnesses. Now, the plaintiff did an excellent job talking about damages, defective products that caused the injury. You hit all the elements of your burden of proof, but you don't have the evidence to a probability to prove each of those elements. In other words, you've got it out there, and you certainly hear the elements of you need to prove, but you have to have testimony to back it up from some of your experts as to that more likely than not, it caused A, B, and C. And again, it's not in the, I looked when I first got this problem, and I looked all over. In fact, I printed out 260 some pages to figure out if anything would give you guidance, and I don't see anything. So I think it puts you in a difficult part. But I don't know enough about the competition, so I direct you to your team members, your coaches, and find out how you should handle that. But at a minimum, you ought to ask your questions. You have an opinion that it's more probable than not that A causes B. The last thing I want to say, and I do this on my soapbox to just about every young lawyer, young possible lawyer, is I think it's a great profession. I think you'll find it interesting. You'll never, no 2 days are ever alike, and it's an interesting field. And the one thing you will hear constantly from the civilian population is, oh, we've got too many lawyers. We've got too many lawyers. We don't need any more lawyers. But I learned a long time ago, and it's in part because of my military background and my service overseas, I can tell you that there's one reason why this country has so many lawyers. The answer is very, very simple. The answer is because we have so much freedom. If you don't have freedom, you don't need lawyers. If you have a dictator or you have a premier telling everyone what they have to do, you don't need a lawyer. If you got a military junta running the country, you don't need any lawyers. But if you got a democracy and you have freedom, lawyers are welcome. We don't send armed guards into your house at night and arrest you for doing something wrong. You go to the courthouse. And as ineffective it might be in some cases, it's far better than anything else that we have as an alternative. And I encourage you, follow through in your interest in the law, study what you can, go to law school, and particularly the women in this group. There's a whole world of opportunity out there for young women to become lawyers. And all I can tell the men is watch out, they're coming. But thank you all. I think you did an excellent job.
Thank you so much, Your Honor, and scoring panels.
Have a wonderful night.
Yeah, and the other team, you guys did wonderful. Thank you for competing with us.
It was a pleasure for me.
Plaintiff, you guys did awesome. It was great being able to compete against you guys. It was a good competition.
You guys did great too. And thank you guys for all of your time, for being here.
If you're at law school level now, I don't know what you're going to be when you graduate from law school.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you all. Have
Have a
an
good night,
amazing
everyone.
rest
Thanks.
of your night.